Buffalo girls, won't you
Won't you
come
come
out
out
tonight?
tonight?
Can't you
Won't you
come
come
out
out
tonight?
tonight?
Can't you
Can't
come
you
out
come
tonight?
out
Buffalo girls get to come out. Oh, no good?
No, it's great.
Catmosphere.
It's good for the catmosphere of the episode. Start off strong, you know?
I see. Well, hee-haw, everyone. My name is Brian.
Who is that? There's a
Yeah,
third
who are
voice.
you?
It's me, Michael.
Yeah, that is a weird third voice that I'm hearing. Can it introduce itself, please?
Hello, everyone. What is going on? My name is Justin. And I like to think of myself as a little friend, a little Christmas guardian angel, if you will. I do some writing, I do some voice acting, but most of all, I do some being your friend. What is and I'm lucky enough to be invited to this glorious finale episode of Checking It Twice.
Did he say he was a guardian angel? I'm gonna fall out of my chair. I'm gonna run out of the room.
I love
so
that
taken
guy. I love
aback
that
by
guy
this.
so much.
Yeah.
He just wants to spit his little tobacco, or I think that's what it is, right? It'll be like chewing tobacco. He just wants to spit his little tobacco, and every single time he tries, Clarence says something wonky. What are we watching today? What have we watched?
Well, here's the thing. Let's first explain that
Of course.
the premise of the podcast
Premise of the
is
podcast.
that Michael and I, we really enjoy taking some checks down in our checkbooks, and the last page, at least in this chapter of the checkbook that is Checking It Twice, is Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, a movie that I truly treasure. Justin, I know you treasure, but
Absolutely.
Michael over here, have you seen this movie?
As of the time of recording, yes. As of like a day ago, no.
That's shocking. So, here's the thing. You've had ample opportunity to watch it, because this movie was released on December 20th, 1946.
That's
And-
before I was born. I've had my whole life to watch it.
Listen, it was not a strong box office performance at the time, because this is after the war. And even though it addresses the reality of the war in the film, there's a lot of movies from around this era that didn't really do so well, because people just, they weren't ready to have a magical time at the movies. But over the years, the tide has really turned on this, and it's become not just a Christmas classic, it's become arguably the definitive Christmas film. And I deserved, in my opinion. I think it, yeah.
When it comes to sheer pleasure of a movie that takes place on Christmas, it has, you know, it's really strong competition, if you will. I was thinking this while watching, though. This is surely an easily debatable thought, but
Yes.
what would you think if I were to say it's less inherently Christmas-y than a lot of other films you have watched for Checking It Twice?
Oh, I would definitely agree that it isn't, because most of the film does not take place on or even around Christmas. In fact, with the initial approach to this film, because obviously Frank Capra, he directed it, and it was based on a short story and booklet from Philip Van Doren Stern called The Greatest Gift. That's what became the basis for this film. And look, Capra has even said when he first looked at the material, he didn't even really think of it as like, oh, this would make a great Christmas movie. He was just like, he just saw the narrative merit in it, and it just all kind of happened to work out in such a way that it is something that I can't go a Christmas without watching it at this point in my life. I don't think.
Oh, absolutely.
Feels too fundamental.
I watch it every year. I have no idea how many times I've seen it by this point. It might have been 15th, 16th time. Quite a many times.
Right.
That said, I'm just a measly special guest. The long time viewers of Checking It Twice surely want to know. They know how you feel, Brian. I'm
Yes.
sure they want to know where Michael is currently at on this movie. I don't know. We watched it a bit ago by this point, and we had to keep our lips sealed on opinions.
We did.
Well, I've seen it once.
Mm-hmm.
For all checking our view counts. I liked it.
That's what we like to hear.
I feel like I watched it too late in my life to like not be like, okay, this is the best thing I'm ever going to see going in. It's like, I don't know. The closest thing I have is Star Wars, where it's like I watch and like, yeah, that was the thing everyone talks about.
Right.
I totally get that. I am positive that the first time I watched this movie, I enjoyed it and didn't go, wowie gobalza, I'm gonna have to watch this every year.
Certainly.
I think in engraving it in tradition, that does so much for a movie-going experience. If I watched this once before, like, if I watched this only that first time before we had all rewatched this, checked it twice, if you will, I don't think I would have been going into this session with such the excitement. But
certainly.
The movie is so dense with information that it is one of those kinds of movies that you pick up a lot more on going in the second time. Like, for instance, like, just
Absolutely.
the start of the movie.
Yes.
I get emotional hearing the characters being really upset for George, knowing how much of a difference they've made in his life. It's kind of over the garden Wall-Y in a sense there, where it's like you gotta kind of it's a valuable rewatch for specifically that very, very opening. Now that you have the full picture, it is good setup and storytelling, but it is a movie that I do think gets better upon rewatch.
Oh, undeniably. Because, yeah, it's just densely layered as it jumps throughout the life of this man. And you really get so much more of an appreciation for it when you see where it goes. And, yeah, just right off the bat with those opening voiceovers. Of course, the very beginning is a bell ringing and we get our opening credits. But then we go right into these opening voiceovers, really without any further context, of just these people praying for a man named George Bailey, saying stuff like he never thinks about himself and that's why he's in trouble. And it's his friends praying, his family, his children. And then we go up to those constellations that twinkle in the sky that represent the angels above. And you know what? Gosh darn it, it's obviously a very old-fashioned effect, but it still works for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I never in a million years would have guessed how this is how It's a Wonderful Life started.
Oh, you had no idea.
Hearing what people said about it, I was, they're stars. They're shining when they're talking.
Yeah.
It's so fun. I mean, what we're still in a time before we landed on the moon. I guess the concept of like the heavens and space kind of being intertwined is a thing that's a lot more believable and cohesive back in the day. And I love that spacious imagery to introduce the heavens, because it's not something you'd see anymore for sure.
No, there's such a surrealism to it that is very striking, but it's so perfectly juxtaposed with how casually they talk about, well, looks like we'll have to send someone down. Oh, George Bailey, yeah, tonight's his crucial night is how they refer to it. And like, oh, who's going to deal with it? Oh, it's that clockmaker's turn. Clarence hasn't gotten his wings yet. And they really, I mean, just the mythology of it is so fascinating, because they talk about, yeah, I mean, so he's thinking seriously about ending his own life. You spend an hour working with him, do a good job, you'll get your wings. I forgot, yeah, no, you don't have your wings yet, you're going to have to concentrate. If you ever get your wings, you'll see all by yourself, but I'm going to help you see. And they take the Clarence through the life of this man, and so we as well will view it through their perspective, and they will occasionally comment on it, but it's certainly not a very frequent commentary, to the point that you really just are fully immersed in the narrative of this life. And we'll definitely get to that once we eventually return to that fantastical element, because in a way, and I definitely want to have this conversation throughout this, it's talked a lot about how this is similar thematically to Christmas Carol, But one of the key differences is that the fantastical stuff is really reserved for the final, like, half hour or so. Like, a good portion, instead of just, like, a ghost taking you through the past or present or what have you of someone's life, you're just seeing it for what it is. It's not the revisiting of it yourself as a ghostly apparition alongside the spirit, you know? So
Right.
I find that very interesting.
I mean, even on the surface, it's I like to think about them kind of as opposites. You have, because
Right.
one movie is about someone who's so intensely
Yes.
good in all facets of his
Right.
life, as opposed to Christmas Carols, someone who's lost their way at a young age, but maybe still has a chance.
Right.
But yeah, the fantastical. It is an easy comparison in that you bring upon the fantastical for this silly little Christmas film that is otherwise fairly grounded.
Yes, and crucially, Michael, as we just saw in A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens makes very clear that Scrooge was dead to begin with, and in this case, the whole idea is that George Bailey is not dead yet, and it's a death that must be prevented. So that also is I didn't really even think about that till just now, but yeah, there's a lot. I think there's a lot to be said about the conversation between these two narratives, but arguably perhaps the most iconic, or at least two of the most iconic Christmas stories, so to speak. But yeah, so then we get our establishing of who George Bailey is, and of course it's a very fitting first sequence of him saving his brother's life from drowning, and inevitably it sets up basically what we see throughout this movie of George Bailey. He helps someone without giving a second thought, and it results in him having to deal with his own personal consequences because this costs him his hearing in one ear. So right off the bat, we get a sense of sort of what we're going to be seeing throughout and the inescapability of that.
It's not like we're ever lingering at any point on George, like, being upset about that fact. Like, I wish I didn't go save my brother and deal with this thing that's going to be with me the entire rest of my life. It is just a symbol of who George is so immediately. Also, real quickly, I wanted to throw out there and just wonder, to a much less interesting extent, that sequence takes place over 100 years ago from our current modern 2020.
Oh gosh,
isn't that just such a fascinating, like, but it's you believe it. It doesn't feel like it's like a time period piece that you would normally get from something that's
just
that long ago
silly.
or even less long ago. It's just, yeah, these just people, but also over 100 years ago.
Yeah, kids messing around, going on a little.
Kids will be kids, of course.
Yeah, sliding on the ice, doing something they shouldn't. Don't we all? And yeah, and then we're pretty seamlessly transitioned into the introductions of not only Violet, who is very much fighting for Georgie's affections, but also Mary, who will of course become his wife. And I know this scene is home to many a laugh.
I love both of them so much. I mean,
the kids are really good at, like, because we haven't even properly met the adult versions of these characters yet, but I know when you revisit it, you really appreciate just how much they nail these personas.
I mean, every character gets something great in that scene. You have, like, Georgie's, like, hot dog.
Yeah, I was at $1 million.
Right off the bat, it's like, oh, this kid has some dreams right there. And that, I mean, that's the basis of his character. But, like, also, like, say brainless, you don't want coconuts, and Violet's, Mary's like, you like every boy. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
And just a bunch of little things like that. But even Gower has a line that I love in that scene. Which, it's so upsetting. He's crying. His son died, but he still gets a great line in there. Where he goes, "I don't pay you to be a canary."
I guess this is how people talked back then. Yeah. His
I
son,
love him.
his son Robert, died of influenza, which has driven him to uh quite visibly drink. He's the town druggist that George is working for, and he almost does something very bad. But before we get to that, I want to make sure we touch on with, gosh, I love the well, first, when Violet tries to ask to be helped down off the bar stool, and George says, "Help you down." It's the best.
It's he gets such an energy of stupid girls. I hate them. In that youthful energy, but at the same time, it's just like, yeah, agreed.
But yeah, Mary's
I
already
love that
very
line.
much. She's already very much smitten with him, and there's that great moment of, "Is this the ear you can't hear on?" she says, and then she whispers, "George Bailey, I'll love you till the day I die." And a little self edit that I just want to throw in here, because I thought of this not too long ago. Gosh, I would have loved if like way later near the end of the movie, he said something to her like, "I heard what you said." I don't know. Maybe it's just a sentimental guy in me. I know it wouldn't really, like, would he really remember that and have not said it? But in movie logic, it would make my heart sore.
Of course. I mean, just her saying that line in the first place already cements, like, she's so motivated, but in a really sweet way. That and, like, the scene with the rock throw later on in the movie, like, I love Mary. Yeah. I love how
She's wonderful.
how much love she has, but also just in very simple ways to go against George Bailey's bigger ambitions and the grounding he really needs.
Absolutely. But already he's telling her, he has these ambitions of going exploring one day. He's going to see the world, do the whole thing, have a bunch of wives, which, okay. okay, little boy. But, yeah, so Mr. Gower over here almost accidentally poisons a kid's prescription. That's bad.
No, that's bad.
Yeah,
not
no.
as one does.
No, not good.
No. And George notices. Pretty immediately.
George does notice. And he tries to, like, ask his father about it, because there's that helpful poster about, like, ask dad. Like,
it's so wonderfully old-fashioned. I gotta laugh at that every time I see it. But, like, in a sweet way, It's right. Great.
And that's where we meet, because he runs into the Bailey Brothers building and loans, and we meet not just his father, but also Mr. Potter, who's trying to foreclose on people. And I love that they ask him straight up, the actual line, "Mr. Potter, what makes you such a hard-skulled character?"
It's a great one, too. I love the fact that he is dreadfully old.
Yes.
Like,
already
40 years before, the end of the movie.
He is an old man.
Maybe more like 30, but still.
He is one of those eternally old men that has just, I guess, always been that old and will never die.
Evil lives on, but that's why we need good to rise up.
Well, we need good because, listen, something wrong is in those capsules. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't Mr. Gower's fault. I know you feel bad. And, like, poor George, like, I mean, he gets slapped. I was looking this up. Apparently, I believe this is true. He is, well, I mean, I don't know how else they would have done it, because it's pretty clearly actually smacked. But yeah, he was actually smacked on set.
Oh, no, I'm going to be thinking about that always.
Yeah, I mean, so there's real blood. So that's a little rough.
Things that can't happen now, luckily.
Yeah, because, like, the kid, I think, like, he, like, grew up and did an interview later of, like, oh, yeah, it was, they had a vision of what it was, and then after, like, you hug it out, and just, like, yeah, I mean, this is just not, this would not be okay now, by any means.
Well, even before that information, Michael, how did you take that scene?
Yeah.
It made me feel bad.
That'll do it.
It's like, oh, I don't want to see him getting, like, hit around. Don't like that.
Yes.
But, like, terrible. I liked him. I was like, he did a good thing.
Yeah.
He cared so much. I mean, and we'll find out by the end of the movie what would have happened if not for that.
Right.
And dreadful to watch.
Right. And Mr. Gower, he's instantly grateful once he kind of sobers up in the moment and sees what almost happened. And It's a very, I'm already emotional at that scene, even before I knew that
It's
if
one of
the
my
kid
favorite
was
parts of
actually
the
being hurt.
movie, which
Yeah.
maybe comes from the fact that it is so incredibly upsetting to watch immediately before that. So the high feels even higher,
Yeah.
comparatively.
Yeah. But then that's all we really see of the young George Bailey at that point. We fade out and then we fade back in on George, all grown up. Clarence doesn't recognize who it is at first. He's like, who are we looking at? Oh, is that the kid that his ear got his ear slapped back by the druggist?
I always find it so funny that he has to ask, oh, is that the kid that we've been watching the whole time?
Clarence has clearly never seen a movie before.
He's from the, 1800? No, he's 200 years old in the mid-90s. He's from, 1700s.
Oh, yeah, he does not understand the language of film.
Ever see a play, maybe?
But, this is when it gets, I feel like it's almost, weirdly modernly meta with the way he's looking at, oh, that's George Bailey. It's a good face. I like it. Like a movie star, I sympathize with him immediately now. Okay, yeah, I don't want him to kill himself. Let's continue.
No, you're so pretty. Don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a perfect transition because it is Mr. Gower having picked out this baggage for him as an adult because he's still very grateful. And then we just we get a full sense of what George's burgeoning adult life appears to be. His father, Peter, has a great line that goes, Mr. Potter hates anybody that has what he can't have. He hates us mostly because it really is just a generational thing that it seems to be. That is the battle that is waged.
Peter Bailey is really interesting in himself, in that he is such a great man, but in such a different way than George is.
Yes.
Because Peter is they even kind of warm-heartedly mock him after his passing. I don't know why he put this whole thing together. It wasn't a smart thing to do. But
he's not a businessman, they say.
He's not a businessman, but he cared on the surface just so much, and unlike George, he was willing to make people his passion. Whereas George doesn't care about that at all on the surface.
Yeah.
But
there's that
he
really
cannot
tender
take the slightest thought of something not going well for someone. And he at least seems smarter than his father when he's not going crazy. He knows really how to bring people together. He could give a good speech, that's for sure. And but you could tell just that the Bailey name carries a lot of good.
He's certainly less grounded than his father. I mean, he even says, "You were born older, George." Because he just has so much that he has his whole life already planned out. He's you're still after that first million before you're 30, and it's a really nuanced, tender conversation because he's just kind of between the two of them in this scene. Because the dad is just a hope, but would you consider coming back to the building and loans? And George is just he's trying not to condescend it, and he apologizes because he can't really help himself. But it's the business of nickels and dimes, and he wants to do something big and something important. And that's when Peter Bailey argues, in a small way, we are doing something important because we're helping people from inside this shabby little office, as George calls it. But George is like, if I didn't get away, I'd bust. So, but ultimately, look, it still is. His father tells him, you've got talent, get an education and get out of here. Even though he is the one that seems to be happy in this place and encouraging for George to stay. It's no, if you want to go, by all means, you can do it. You have what it takes. And I love this line of George says back, Pop, you want a sock? I think you're a great guy. Oh, really good.
I love that. I love that moment so much. But then I can't help but feel sad that one of the last things that we see told to him is want a shock. and knowing what happens to him later that night.
Oh, I didn't think of it that way.
I think about it every time. I don't think that was the intention behind in that writing, but I can't help but think about it, and it's really sad.
Wow. I mean, for me, I think about it more just that he hears from his father this, like, approval of, yes, go out and do your thing, which is all the more reason that I think he feels so internally obligated to do just that, and he never really can. But yeah, we got a dance to go to, everybody. There's a dance.
Gotta love the dance. Michael, you love the dance?
We're going to the dance.
That doesn't answer the question, Michael.
No.
No?
fair.
Okay.
If you go with friends and you're just kind of hanging out, does that make it better, or are we just, like, straight up not, like, going to dance people?
Oh, I don't care about dances typically in general. I just mean I enjoy this dance in this movie. I think it's good.
Watching people go to dances.
Right.
Very different experience.
Exactly.
From what I gather.
Yeah, because Marty Hatch, he comes up like, remember my kid sister Mary? You dance with her one time, you'll give her the thrill of her life. And George's like,
will.
all right. What's the, yeah?
He sure will give her the thrill of her life.
He sure will, because then they lock eyes, and it's movie magic. It's that love at first sight. Look at these two. There's that other guy, Freddie. George just takes her away from him instantly. Like, oh, why don't you stop annoying people? Hey! And that brings us right into the big Charleston contest, the dance contest, and a really interesting choice of words here of those not tapped by the judges will remain on the floor. Because, of course, the floor is what does not remain, because this punk convinces Freddy to open up the floor to reveal the pool below, because there's a pool below it. And, like, everyone seems to notice except for George and Mary, who don't, and they just keep dancing. They think, oh, it must be pretty good. They're dancing. And then they're being cheered on and then they fall backwards into the pool. But they own it. Like, it's just such a, like, strong chemistry about them. And even though there was an attempt to just, like, kind of, like, mock them and get revenge for the date being taken, everyone, he just has this energy about him that everyone loves. He really can rally people around, so everyone else jumps into the pool, even the people that were trying to pull a fast one on him in the first place. So I just thought that was very sweet. What do you make of this whole pool silly fun time?
I mean, I definitely thought it was cute, like how they were still like pretended as if they were just still dancing and that nothing happened. Like I thought it was definitely like fun to watch. Seeing everybody hop in, it's like, yeah, look at them all. They're all so excited and happy and just kind of living their life. It was, and also, is this a thing that schools do? They just have pools inside, like underneath the thing. Is that a normal thing?
Maybe it was like a hip new thought back in the 40s, and like maybe it just didn't catch on at like I really wish it did. One of the things
it seemed very novel.
I love them getting like really close to dancing into the pool, and the people going, "Wow!" That always cracks me up. And then them just thinking that they're just really good dancers, of course.
Oh yeah, no, that's the only explanation. But yeah, there's such strong chemistry between them that night, and that's when we get they're walking back home. Iconic movie scene. Throw a rock at the old Granville house. Mary doesn't want to, though, because she thinks it's full of romance and wants to move in there. And George says, I wouldn't live in there if I was a ghost. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yes! I get it! Michael, you get it?
Oh, I get it.
And then George, like, talks about the things he wants to do with his life, and this upsets Mary for good reason, and like very passionately she throws a rock and doesn't say what she wished for.
Right, because this is his whole famous monologue of, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. He's going to see the world, come back here, go to college, see what they know, then he's gonna build things, and George, he has it all figured out. You know what I mean? Like he knows all of it.
I love that little. I'll see what they know. Like
yeah, that's so
college.
great.
Like I'll learn from real experience, but I'll go there anyway. I'll humor them.
Yeah, it's like deep down he knows, but like that there's plenty he doesn't. But he just is so full of like bravado and enthusiasm that he doesn't. It's an afterthought.
And then, if we're comfortable moving forward on that, we hit a little bit of a tragedy.
We do.
And it's very sudden, very sad. And every time I watch the movie, I'm surprised by how early it happens.
Yes, because we're in peak romance. Because this is the part when he's talking about, what do you want, the moon? He'll throw a lasso and pull it down. Because Mary's not saying what she wants from when she throws the rock. And there's they're having all this banter, and it just comes to a very abrupt halt. And yeah, his father's had a stroke. And I mean, it's not even like a protracted death scene or anything, or like rushing home. Like he finds out about it, he goes home, and then we just cut to, I think it's 3 months later, right?
Yes, it's definitely 3 months later, and some people are like, that's definitely not enough time to like talk about closing down Peter Bailey's company, but like Potter, he's ready. He's ready to pound. He's probably never been happier in his life.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because George, what he does is he was gonna go on a trip to Europe, but he gave it up to straighten things out for 3 months, and they need to appoint a successor to Peter. But yeah, Mr. Potter, he's just so dismissive. Even though Uncle Billy's over here saying, you probably drove him to his grave. Mr. Potter's like, I don't know. Nothing bad on that guy. He was a man of higher ideals. But ideals without common sense can ruin this town. You know, he's just merciless. It's so, yeah. Because then he throws out his whole ideology of, look, that's like the bank turns down a loan, but then over here, the building and loans will vouch based on character. So then you just, you get all nicey nice with and be a friend.
Play pool with a friend, and that's you get a house.
It'll result in laziness instead of a thrifty working class. Fills people's heads with impossible ideas. Because, I mean, they kind of are, like, impossible ideas that are in George's head. Like, there's a truth to that. We're seeing how big his dreams are, and they're dreams that won't come to pass. But for himself, at least, George will really make those dreams reality for others. And, yeah, that's when you get the whole really strong speech from him, not just in defense of his father and his father's character, but also just the idea of, like working people are what make this society, and that it takes so long to save $500, which inflation adjusted is this what would be needed to buy a good home at the current rate. So like if they do most of the work in the community, would it be so terrible if they were able to live well? They're not cattle, Mr. Potter. And George, he understands that the life of his father was worth a whole lot more than Mr. Potter's, but still, like, even though he says that and he believes it, he has his own reservations about taking on that position, because basically what happens is they were being threatened to be put out of business, but everyone in the room was like, oh, no, this George guy, he's got it, so we'll vote with Potter unless you're appointed as secretary. That's the one condition. And so, of course, that's what George does. And how are we feeling? I think this is a good time to just check in on how we're feeling about the actual, like, performance by James Stewart as George Bailey. Good old Jimmy Stewart. How do we feel about him? Let's open it up to the floor.
It's really great. He's very, like, charismatic, and it's like, yeah, I like this guy. I'd hang out with him. I'd live in a town with him and give him money.
So a little background on Jimmy Stewart, because he's a famous old Hollywood actor, and he also served in World War II, and went through some really rough stuff near the end of it, to say the least, putting it lightly. So he had a lot of PTSD from it, and he wasn't getting job offers after he came back because it was very apparent that he was, like, kind of broken from it. The only other offer that he got was to do a film like, oh, we'll do the Jimmy Stewart story. It'll show you as a military hero, but he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to talk about that. He just he wasn't sure like what to do, and also people weren't really hiring him. But then this opportunity came along, and he was hesitant about it. But here's the great irony that I found in my research. The person that I guess convinced him to take the part was Lionel Barrymore, who played Mr. Potter.
Oh,
yeah.
golly.
So the great irony, of course, is that here's an offer that Mr. Potter presented to George that George actually ended up taking, because obviously we'll see. There's several offers, especially one specifically that George does not end up taking. But yeah, I mean, obviously it ended up being Jimmy Stewart's favorite film that he ever made, and we can all see why.
I think so much during the film about how Stewart kind of just commands the scene.
Yes.
Like, if he's in a bad mood, like he will be in the film fairly soon from what we're talking about with Mary, like you feel so much misery, and he's so so dang good at showing that. When he's thinking he's gonna go to jail later, and he's kissing his kid and like nearly sobbing, and like that's such a quick moment because he goes back to like anger and stubbornness very shortly after that moment. But right there, I
always think about that scene. Yeah,
I want to cry too. And then at the end of the movie, cheery George Bailey, there's nothing more radiating. I love that.
It's just everything that he was going through in his life at that time all ends up on screen, and this was the perfect narrative to bring all of it out. And I mean, it's one of the best pieces of acting I've ever seen. Like, it absolutely is. And yeah, I mean, so George, he takes the position.
He takes the position, and it's one of my favorite lines comes up with Clarence's.
Yes,
I know, he didn't go. Just because it is so clear. Even to Clarence at this point.
Film novice. Like, yeah.
Film novice Clarence, the wingless angel at this point. He has so much heart in him that he would never, ever, ever let the building and loan go down and let Potter like take over the world. He cares so dang much, and it's the curse of George Bailey, and it's around from the beginning. And I mean, the movie is basically all about let's paint this picture of this sort of curse, and let's actually explain maybe it's not. It's
right.
Wonderful. I'm going to take this quick moment to note that my lights are currently flickering. We could take this little note out of the podcast, but just if I ever vanish, the winds are like crazy right now, like crazy rainstorms. if I'm
it seems the angels above may not enjoy what we're doing.
Don't say something funny that you're gonna want to keep this in. This is nonsense.
I will. Why not? So George, what he does is he gives his college money to Harry instead, and the way the narration goes is, and George got 4 years older waiting for Harry to come back and take over the building and loans, and then Harry gets off the train, and there's this moment because he sees Uncle Billy, and it's just like, I haven't changed at all, and no one changes much over here, and it just really further solidifies this idea of Bedford Falls is a place of stasis. Like it's just it is what it is. And you're not seeing much of an evolution. It's just it's going in the same direction. But he also has a surprise guest, his new wife Ruth, who there's her father has taken a great liking to Harry, and he's going to offer him a promising new job in research with a good future. And of course Harry's like, listen, I'm not taking that. I know it's my time to take over the building and loans, but goodness gee, what do we think George is going to do this time?
Keep doing his George thing. I do want to ask Michael.
Yes,
Michael,
please.
have you ever been in a situation where, like, a friend goes off to college and comes back and is just married now and didn't tell any of their family.
There's no social media back then.
That's true. It's hard to avoid it, but like, you would think that's a little tough to not state even back then. I don't.
Sure.
Maybe I don't know the culture well enough from it would be like 70 years. No, wait. It's 2020, not 2000.
So you're telling me, Justin, you're telling me that on this podcast live on the air right now is not a good time to announce my new wife to you?
Brian, tell me more.
Oh, it's not a good time? Okay, no problem.
But
Yeah.
Maybe next finale.
Hopefully you learned your lesson. So
maybe
anyway.
Next holiday focused podcast season finale.
Good. So George's mother over here is encouraging George to go. You know that Mary? Remember Mary? She's come back home from school. She's the kind of girl who can help you find the answers. There's a really sweet scene between her name Irene or Ma, as everyone calls her, and yeah, it's just, look, she was homesick for Bedford Falls. Mary was, and for her family and everything, and that's something that George just can't understand. It's like, what? Bedford Falls? Why? Help you down.
He's the same character through and through.
Yeah.
Nothing changes in Bedford Falls, you know.
No, but Mary certainly has. She's still smitten with him, just as George's mother predicted. Even though old Hee-Haw Sam Wainwright over here seems to have taken a liking to her.
He says he tried to, like, take my girl away from me or something, while he has, like, I don't know, just some woman, like, all around him. Like, you could tell that, like, you know, maybe he likes Mary, but, like, is he crazy about Mary the way she is about George?
Right, yeah, no, 100%. And this is a great time to bring in, for Donna Reed plays Mary, and gosh, she just sparkles on the screen when she has this scene of she's setting up the same song that they walked to, like, from the dance, and the art of the moon with the lasso based on the thing that George said, and she's just so giddy about how she's setting it all up because she hears that George is coming over from his mother, even though he didn't tell her that's what he was going to do. She just knew.
That's where he's going. He also went in the reverse direction, right?
Yeah, he wasn't even going that way.
You know, mother knows her son.
She certainly does. I have seen. I'm very lucky to have seen a screening of this movie with a talk by Mary Owen, who's the daughter of Donna Reed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, yes, no, she had plenty to say about just how much, like, it was a colossal experience to witness what became of this film, and it's crazy to me, especially because this seems to be such a foundational piece of culture. Just the thought of anyone having, like, this firsthand account of, like, oh yeah, I mean, you know, that movie that we did, it's just crazy to me. Like, it feels like it's just always existed.
I mean, to most people who are alive right now, it did.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, look, imagine if you were Mary in this moment of, you're playing that song, you have the art based on the brief one-liner this guy said, and it just so, it's so tailored to him, you're just so excited, and he shows up and he's just, like, flatly dismissive of everything else. Oh, is this some sort of joke? Like, oh god.
He doesn't even pay enough attention to it to get it, but clearly she put so much time into that. She's been dreaming of this moment, and he comes in going like, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't want to be so
I just came in to get warm. Yeah.
Jeez. George, I mean, it's just a whole nother scene of, like, why? why does he have to just... I mean, he's upset again later in the film, but here it's just so sad because Mary does not see it coming at all. I mean, later in the movie, you get kind of a sense that, like, okay, she knows George by this point on a more intimate level.
Yeah.
Here, it's a young woman heartbroken.
Oh, she's caught off guard. She smashes that record. Like, good for her.
I love that. Oh, she's great.
Yeah. She's, well, I mean, like, look, he may have had all this hope about it, but if he's a jerk, she's gonna, like, come see ya. But he's also, I mean, from his perspective, he's angry because this is really just highlighting how everyone else in his life is going on, passing him by. Because look at it from George's perspective, because then it's this younger person that he used to know, and now she's kind of like caught up and is passing because she's out of school, and it's that vibe of when you graduate college, and trust me, once then you do, then you understand this kind of piece of his life a lot more, because then you just feel like you're sort of drifting through, watching other people younger than you do what you did, and you're like, why am I just came in to get warm. Well, stop asking me questions about what I want and why I'm here. Like, I don't know.
I'll be there so soon.
Yeah, Michael, you'll be there. And then, you know what? You're going to bump up your enjoyment of this movie. God will.
That's what I need. That's what I really need for this movie.
You need to go through pain. I don't wish pain upon you, but I do.
But if that's what it takes for this movie.
Yeah.
Here we come.
Fully
Brian, you mentioned the line earlier with his mom saying that Mary, is the one with all the answers.
Right.
And a thing I love in the scene is George going to Mary and saying, "Oh, you're supposed to be the one with all the answers," as though like Mary would have heard his mom say that, which she wouldn't have. Like she has no context for this. She doesn't know that she's supposed to be this perfect person, but George was. Not even that George even believed his mom when he said it, but like you could tell that in all this hurt that George has, hearing a thing like that, I'm sure he kind of wants to believe it's true, that just walking in there would suddenly make him happy, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's not how feelings work. So
well, you know what
it's just
helps?
gonna feel worse. What else?
He comes to another crossroads, which really kind of exacerbates the decision, because he's offered a job, right, from that Keehaw Sam over the phone. The chance of a lifetime. And don't tell me you still want to be with the old broken down building and loans.
Yeah,
so,
idiot. I mean,
idiot.
I wasn't thinking about it until just now, but it's such a minor note. Like, he could be working in plastics while he's working in glass. Like,
right.
And his brother just would be getting the shinier one anyway, so I mean.
That's true. No, but George gets the shiniest shine of all. Because he marries Mary. And it is after he's, like, trying to, like furiously state, not just to Mary, but to himself. He's like, I want to do what I want. Very insistent. Because he feels, like, the grasp loosening on the dream of going out to the world. But he just sees, he can't deny what's right in front of him. And it's a very passionate kiss. One of the great movie kisses, I think. And yeah, he marries Mary. Clearly the right choice, I think. Marrying Mary just feels right. Sounds right.
And there's another naming that we'll bring up later, similarly to that. But
Merry
first, I want to note
Christmas.
that there you go. Mary, Michael. I think you just thought of the perfect rename for this movie.
Merry Christmas.
But spelled like her name.
I got it.
One of the great. Okay, we talked about one of the great movie kisses, but one of the great movie characters.
Oh, here we go.
Mary's mom.
Yes.
It was so wonderfully miserable.
Sam's on the
at
phone. She was really Team
of her
Sam.
being with George instead of Samuel.
Yeah.
And she's miserable. She's about to cry at the end of the scene with the kiss that we were just talking about. Right in the next scene, the actual wedding is happening, and she still looks like she's just as miserable. However much time later.
Yep.
I could talk about this a whole lot. Just the fact that so many characters in this film only get one little segment. and they all come back at the end to some degree.
Absolutely.
Whether through George's big magical experience or the actual ending scene, or both. But Mary's mom, for instance, like she gets these 2 back-to-back scenes, and that's basically it right there. You have Gower, who has this really intense scene at the very beginning. You would think that he would be a recurring character, but no, I mean that's it for him. We have 2 scenes right in Martini/Nick's bar, and they're close, and they're close to being back-to-back.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're revisiting it, it feels like a pivotal place, and they talk about it throughout the movie. We just don't go there until like immediately before the bridge scene.
I know. I was thinking about that this time too.
You kind of just touch on, and then they go, but they're good at making everyone memorable. It's George, even like Peter Bailey, you don't see like a ton of. His mom a little bit more of, but pretty much it's you got like George, Mary, and Potter that you get a lot of.
Right.
And Potter is even a little arguable. His kids later on, you get before the bridge scene, you get 1 segment with the kids,
which is crazy. You feel like that then they would be. Yeah, I mean, I guess you get their voiceover at the very beginning, but that's it. Yeah. No, I mean, the world, it feels very lived in, but it's not the world that George has set his sights on, because they want to... this is when they're going off on their honeymoon all over the world. Again, that's what George is looking to do. They jump into that taxi cab, and they're describing what they're about to do. And it was really on this viewing, I never thought of it this way before. Because there's that great line, because it's like, okay, you're going to go over here and spend the night in Paris and this and that. And after that what? After that, who cares? They say. And it's just such a gleeful little exchange. But at the same time, it's so interesting that even though George is always living his mind seemingly like on the future, like trying to get $1 million before age of 30, have first million before then, it's such an abstract idea of seeing the world. And once that lofty dream is realized, like after that, like, well, who cares? Like, but like, what would he do? Because there is like sort of a hollowness to it, because he just wants the glory of that. But what would come next?
There's also kind of the flip view of that I was thinking more of, and that it's fascinating that it feels so reverse for George, that usually he's very specific about what he wants, right? But it's Mary who's grounding him.
That's true.
It's so exemplary of the effect that Mary has on him, and ultimately is a really good thing for him that she's able to help him want to take it step by step instead of just focusing on these very specific dreams. It kind of goes hand in hand with what you say, but in the view of that Mary does this for him, and that she is really what he needs, even if it's, I mean, you have wants versus needs, and she brings a lot of the needs while also being a bit of a want, and more so as the movie goes on.
They balance each other out really well, because it's so crucial that, because they see the crowd forming around Building Loans, and Mary says, please, let's not stop George, because she knows what'll happen if they do. And when that does happen, she does give the permission to give up the money that they would have used for the honeymoon to help that situation. So it has that kind of two-handed quality of like, well, even though we would love this, again, as you said, sort of rolling with the punches, the grounded living in the now that he needs in his life, as opposed to just setting his sights off so far into the future that he can't, he's floating away. But yeah, basically what's happening, and this is one of my favorite scenes. The bank, it takes all their money. It's the depression. The depression has hit,
right?
And they tried to close the doors, but they can't do that now. Everyone's in there. Mr. Potter calls. There's a rumor you've closed your doors. George, are you all right? Do you need any police? Mobs get pretty ugly sometimes, And he's like, he just guaranteed the bank a week, and then they'll reopen. And George points out on the phone, he just took over the bank. And he's trying to buy George out too, but he won't play into it. But if they close their doors before 6 p.m., they will never reopen. And yeah, this scene, it's so, again, you see how George rallies everyone around, because everyone's just like, they want their money, and there's such panic and hysteria, which of course Potter doesn't feel any because he's perfectly well situated in this. So George tries to tell them, just remember this thing isn't as black as it appears, which is a line that hits different if you watch the colorized version of the film as opposed to the black and white. Because old man Potter, he's going to pay 50 cents on the dollar, and everyone's like, better get half than nothing. George's like, no, Mr. Potter doesn't care about you. He'll abandon you when he gets the chance. We can work this out. And this is when Mary holds up the money. How much do you need? And George doesn't miss a beat. Now that, okay, there's that permission. Great. Okay, I got $2,000. This will tide us over till the bank reopens. And that one jerk needs all of his money, and he wants to close his account. Was it $242?
You got it exactly right.
Yep.
I was just about to say, yep. And then George has to declare, that's a loan, okay?
That's a loan, yeah. And everyone else is just like, okay, I could do with 20. I could do with 20. I'll sign the paper. And George, again, how he's a people's person. You don't need to sign anything. He knows you're good for it, okay. And then we get one of the best little moments. Someone says, can I have $17.50? Which was done on the fly by the request of Frank Capra. And Jimmy Stewart didn't know it was going to happen, so the reaction you get from him is genuine surprise. And 17 kisses on the cheek. So that's movie magic right there.
To hear.
Yeah. But they get to 6 p.m. and close the door. They're still in business. They still got $2 left. They celebrate. I love that scene so much. One of the best scenes.
Mama Dollar and Papa Dollar.
Yes. And Mary has him come home to that old, broken-down house, 320 Sycamore, the Waldorf Hotel. And it's Bert and Ernie, right? The cops. No relation to Sesame Street characters. they were not. It is purely a coincidence. That is what the people behind the Sesame Street Muppets have said. But they help them have their nice little honeymoon in this old hotel. And it's leaking and broken down, but Mary's there. And it's their honeymoon. She says, welcome home, Mr. Bailey. And remember the night she broke the windows here? This is what she wished for.
Which warms me so much every time.
Yeah.
I just want Mary to have everything in the world that she wants at all times during this movie.
Absolutely. Look, how crafty that then she figured, because this is the day of. They were just gonna go and they organized this whole thing. How sweet. Like this.
Well, Mary was going to trick him into taking this house right after the honeymoon anyway. But she's like, okay, we're not doing the honeymoon thing. I'll just forward some plans a little bit.
That's true. No, you're right. She's prepared. But look, I mean, at this point now, the Bailey Park that is being constructed can't be laughed off anymore by Mr. Potter. Because you have his rent collector who's making this. Like, there's more, all these houses being built, dozens of the prettiest little homes you ever saw. And one of these days, this bright young man's going to be asking George Bailey for a job, and Mr. Potter can't have that. No,
one of these houses has a goat. You wouldn't believe it.
Please talk about the goat. You were so tickled by the goat.
It's Martini's family that moves in, and like they have all these, like a ton of kids pile into one car, and yep. I think there's like a puppy or two, and then just all of a sudden there's just a goat in the car. It makes me so happy every time. I love that goat. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect exemplification right there of why these families. Why the building and loan is so important, because these families with these wonderful goats would not get what they need otherwise.
Yeah, Mr. Potter would treat that goat like cattle, you know.
Oh,
and it's a goat, not cattle. Yeah. So we get another really understated moment, because then Sam shows up, reminding he offered to let George in on the ground floor of his business venture. And there's that hurt moment, like, you know, they're all just, they're cordial with each other. But then after Sam leaves, George and Mary, like, they kind of, like, the happy aura they were giving off when they were speaking to them, just, like, subsides in the way that it does whenever you're, like, talking to like a neighbor or friend or something, and then just that social pressure wears off, and it's just a little bit of that, frustration that like George kicks the door of that car, and
it's always one of the scenes I am quicker to forget.
Same.
It is always with my personal age, I am increasingly more interested by the scene.
Yes, it's that kick that really makes me notice it and remember it each year. But Mr. Potter, of course, he's got to do something about this George Bailey who's becoming a real threat in the sense that it's the one other thing that he doesn't have. So he calls George in. Mr. Potter owns just about everything but Bailey Building and Loans. And look, he makes a big pitch to George Bailey. Take during the Depression, you and I were the only ones who kept our heads. You took care of the building and loans. I took care of basically everything else. But, you have to take care of your wife, and you're, like, if you're going to have kids, like, you're making a decent, like, what is it you make? Oh, that'd be fine for any ordinary yokel. But George Bailey? And this is a really good line that he comes up with. The screenwriters came up with it. But the George Bailey? That's not good enough for George Bailey, who hates the building and loans almost as much as I do. Right? Because he does. He's dissatisfied with that. And Potter's picked up on that. He knows there's been that resistance, that reluctant feeling from George. So he offers George, okay, manage my affairs at a starting salary of $20,000 a year, which, keep in mind, at the time, a good living. You could buy your wife fine clothes, go to New York and Europe on business. It'll be really nice. And George, like, he's like kind of swayed by this is the
he can kind of live his life,
Yeah.
He's getting the offer right there. It's not like Samuel's offer where it's like, oh, put some money in. I'm pretty awesome, so it'll probably work out, and it did.
Yeah.
Would have worked out. But Potter is just it's very straight up. Potter has a record. That he's accurate in what he's saying right now. There's ulterior motives that right. George needs to think about, and it takes a moment for it to hit him. But
yeah,
it is the most direct offer he could ever receive to just live his dreams.
Yes. And it's so tempting. It's the deal with the devil right there. Michael, would you take this deal? Would you take the offer?
I mean, I would say, like, oh, no. But, like, if I actually had the offer, I probably would.
That's the thing.
It depends on the circumstances. Because, would I theoretically want to take the offer just inherently on what the job itself is? That sounds fun. If this is also contingent on the concept of the building and loan would probably go under and Potter takes over the world. Maybe less so.
Right. The world being Bedford Falls, but still George's world, his little world.
Yes, but to us, the audience, it feels like it.
No, it absolutely does, which is crucial. But yeah, he even says, like, can I take, the time to think it over, 24 hours to consider the offer? Yeah, sure, go home to your wife, talk about it. And then George, he snaps back to it. Like, oh, wait, no. Wait, actually, no. Reason you suck speech. And leave.
Even before that, one of my favorite moments in the whole film is after George shakes Potter's hand and he looks at it and he looks at his hand, wipes it. Like, that is the most disgusting thing he's ever had any contact with. Like,
yeah,
so skeeved out.
Yeah,
you could see it all over.
Yeah, and he knows right there. He doesn't need any more time, and he turns it down, leaves in a huff, comes home to Mary, to whom he asks, "Why would you marry me, Mary? Mary, why'd you marry me?" Well, he doesn't go for the wordplay right in front of him, but he does ask, "Why would you marry me?" He does it
in the mirror every morning. He's like, one of these days, I'm going to do it.
But Mary responds jokingly, to keep from being an old maid, which we'll get back to. We'll get back to that.
Oh, no.
Because then we get some more narration Because remember, angels are watching this. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing angels like do a speed run of George's life. Because he never leaves Bedford Falls.
Do you think they have competition speed runs like on like Angel Twitch or something? Like who could get through George's life the fastest?
I think you need your wings before you're invited to one of those tournaments.
Clarence has a lot of catching up to do.
He certainly does. Mary, she has 4 kids and still finds time to run the USO during the war. So this is World War II. It's addressed. And Harry Bailey, like a lot of the people that we've come to know during this time have had big wartime achievements, but Harry Bailey topped them all because he shot down 15 planes, 2 of them as they were about to crash into a transport full of soldiers, all while George fought the War of Bedford Falls, which, yeah.
And meanwhile, you have Potter, who is doing the most Pottery thing possible and sending these poor young adults into war. Yeah. He's just like,
cattle.
I'll let that guy get shot. Like,
the cattle, yeah.
It's absolutely the most Pottery thing in the world, and is so perfectly thought through there.
Yeah. No, it just shows that, like, when it comes right down to it, usually it's just you let them work to their deaths, but there it's very directly sending them to their deaths. So
also, there's something I didn't think about until this watch that really fascinated me. Firstly, it very much seems like, this is the kind of thing that George would have wanted to do. It's another, going off to war would have been another thing on the list of like big adventurous lifestyle kind of things that he'd be interested in doing. He couldn't go because of the ear.
Right.
And Uncle Billy and Potter are talking about it at the bank a little bit. And it wasn't until this watch that I really thought for the first time, wow, Potter kept George Bailey from going to war.
Right.
That is the... It's not a thing that's talked about, but that's like the most direct thing that Potter does throughout the film to like really get at George, besides what is to come very shortly after that bank scene.
Yes, no, of course. Because we hit December 24th. We hit the day that the rest of the film's action is basically going to play out on. Because at this point, Harry has gotten the Congressional Medal of Honor. Woo! The president's going to be decorating him. It's a whole thing. George, he's a great guy. Does he see that? And he's like, about my life. No, he's so proud. He's giving out newspapers to everyone. Has the headline on it. They're putting up the big welcome banner in town. He's so thrilled for his brother. Mother just had lunch with the president's wife. What do you think they talked about?
I was going to say earlier, and I forgot to say, like, how much worse would the movie be if, like, it took till, like, the end of the movie for George to go, oh my gosh, this is why my dad was so... I didn't realize. I thought my dad was kind of a loser up until this moment where I realized just how much he gave to them. No, like, throughout the movie, he's praising his father, and he knows how important his father was. But now the same thing goes for Harry. George, despite everything that goes seemingly wrong in his life, he does have so much care for others in his heart.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So that we get to the point of there's a bank examiner here, and George tries to show him the headline, and he's a little unimpressed of like, oh, the Congressional Medal of Honor, meeting with the president. Well, I guess they do those things. Anyway.
That's one of my favorites right there.
So Uncle Billy is counting the money. He stops to chastise Mr. Potter. Can't keep the Bailey boys down. Says not every heel was in Germany and Japan. So that's a real dig. For sure. Good for Uncle Billy. And unknowingly, in the confusion of showing the paper that he's so proud of, he loses $8,000 worth of money. Mr. Potter, he takes it and he hides it. There's that guy always pushing around the wheelchair. And I remember reading this somewhere, and this I find so fascinating that it's like, why then do you have then this other character also that's then just there when it could just so easily be Potter of his own volition, no one else around. But there's an additional evil to the fact that you have the personified representation of someone else who's there that just lets this evil happen. Because, again, they're going to keep the money from him,
So now we know who the real villain is. Potter, you have an out.
Yes, exactly. Potter's not so bad compared to this bystander. That was my point. But yeah, no, not my point at all. So he tries to retrace his steps with George, looks everywhere for the money, and there'll be huge consequences if it can't be found. Bankruptcy, scandal, prison. And George yells, one of them's going to go to jail, and it's not going to be him. But of course, I mean, literally, like, not even that many hours past that night before he professes, like, that it's him. It's like, he takes the fall for it.
He tells Potter, of all people,
Yeah.
that it was him. And
Yeah.
Potter even, like, takes a moment because Potter knows that it's not George's fault.
He saw it happen.
Like, that if anything, it's closer to Uncle Billy's fault, but really it's his own fault.
Absolutely.
And he goes, you misplaced $8,000? And George sticks by the story. He doesn't let up. He goes, yeah, no, that was me. I need your help.
And you would think that perhaps a man with any morals at all would hear that and be affected in some way. But to Mr. Potter, all it says is, oh, okay. Well, then, in that case, it's time for you to be arrested.
For himself.
Yeah. Time for me to swear out a warrant for your arrest. Well, you can't hide in a little town like this. But before that, we have to get to the big family scene when George comes home for Christmas. The piano's being played. He hugs and kisses. That's that moment you mentioned of him hugging and kissing his kid very emotionally. As the kid is playing very, unknowingly being a kid. But Mary certainly notices, and we do as well. And he goes up to see Zuzu, little daughter, in bed. Since they gave her a flower in school, and she didn't want to ruin it, so she didn't bundle up. So she's cold, has a bit of a temperature. And again, constantly George is feeling terrible. He's sick. The guilt that he can't provide for them properly. Give them decent clothes, a better home, a more expensive car. Can't provide any of that. So he asks, paste my flower back together. So George, he just puts the little broken pieces into his pocket and presents it back to her, totally buys it, and encourages her to sleep. But she's not sleepy. She wants to look at her flower, which at this point, I want to look at my flower.
I love her.
She is great. Our phones are our flowers in the modern age. I'm going to write a think piece about this.
Oh no, the modern remake of It's a Wonderful Life is going to be pretty wild.
I'm not sleepy. I want to look at my phone.
I'm gonna check my Insta. I gotta see how many people watched my story today.
It's broken. Paste it.
It's a little harder to fix. He's like, oh wait, 1 second. I'm gonna paste it. He turns around like he does in the current movie. Yeah. And then he runs out the door to the Apple store and comes back a couple hours later, and she goes, "Oh, great. Let me put in this glass of water."
No, I need another iPhone. Hot dog. Okay, so. Of course, the next thing he does is Mrs. Wells, Zuzu's teacher, is on the phone. Which, why was she on the phone in the first place, by the way? Did we catch that?
I mean, I don't think it's stated, but I always take it as, like, it's the teacher calling up the house going, oh... I wanted to make sure that Zuzu's doing okay. How is she? Which makes it so much sadder what comes next.
George's wrath of, like, what are you thinking? Letting my kid go home like this just really lays into her. And then the husband comes on the phone, and it's a whole big thing. Mary's really trying to just stop him from upset, because he can already tell that he's angry, but it's another matter entirely to extend that anger outside the house through the telephone line. But yeah, I mean, he finally just really breaks down, throws a fit. Stop playing that piano tune over and over, trashes the room, and we just lay in that silence for a bit, and he apologizes to everyone individually. I owe you an apology. I'm sorry, but the kids are watching their father go through this. Like they cry.
Terrifying. Absolutely.
Yeah. George, why must you torture the children? And Mary even says, I caught it. She says, why don't you, and doesn't finish the thought. And he leaves. And this is when she encourages the kids to pray for him, which is then the direct setup of what we hear in the opening voiceovers.
Right. I mean, I don't blame George for freaking out. I mean, the piano sequence that his daughter was playing was so repetitive. Like, I get it. I mean, the thing about that for real though is that being that it is so repetitive, I love how that does kind of set up for like a kind of like uneasy sort of scene. Like it's the same melody very briefly playing over and over and over, and like there is something uncomfortable for like a non-evolving melody like that.
Another one of the best
so
scenes
perfect.
in the movie.
And if you listen, I mean, it is playing throughout the entire time he's back at the house until the freak out happens and he tells her to stop and kicks things, and that's the first time you really get silence in a really long time. Yeah, and it's scary.
Yeah, you feel that silence after all of the Hark the Herald Angels sing over and over again, which of course we'll hear again at the very end.
Right.
So they really prime us for it. But yeah, it's that it's the thought that he can't get off of his mind of, the family is celebrating, it's Christmas time, but there's a looming threat of what will be done about this money. And yeah, I mean, George has basically got nothing to his name. A life insurance policy, as Mr. Potter points out, you're worth more dead than alive. So... Which, those words really, unfortunately, ring true to him in this state of mind. And George goes to martinis, prays to God, even though he's not a praying man. He's at the end of his rope, show me the way. Which, another thing that I think is really interesting, because we don't hear his own prayer in the opening voiceover. It really just is the prayers of everyone else that is enough. It's not just like that act of his own prayer.
It's about the people in your life and how you affect them.
Absolutely. Which, I mean, it definitely, it means a lot to see that he's, like, opening up and, like asking for help in that respect. But it is definitely an interesting touch that isn't what allows him to get the divine intervention. Like, he would have gotten it anyway, thanks to everyone else who was looking out for him. He didn't have to get it himself. But yeah, there's the moment of that teacher's husband happens to be at the bar, punches him. Arguably somewhat deserved, but still George's friends like defend him of court because of course they do. And he's not allowed back in here anymore.
Like, and it's the fact that like George did kind of deserve it that makes the scene more touching, because it shows that like as long as you are through and through a good person and do what you can to help others, even in your lower moments, people will be there to pick you back up. And in that scene, very literally off the ground.
Right. No, of course. That guy's not allowed back in here anymore. And George, please stay, rest up, get better. But no, he's not in his right mind. Drives into a tree. Guy's really angry. My great-grandfather planted this tree. Weirdly feels like comic relief. I don't know if it was intended.
I feel like it is.
Okay.
I don't
Probably.
know. Because I think whenever you're doing something like this and you have such a grim kind of scene, you want some level of comic relief that isn't like haha funny, but like a little more absurdly funny, that isn't gonna like tonally mess with things too much, because you know what George is planning on doing right now, so like you need a little something there. It meshes perfectly tonally, so it all clicks.
Absolutely. And it really just then, he stumbles recklessly. He nearly is hit by that bus and almost walks right into it again, which just the acting on that, it just absolutely feels like he is this close to being gone. Overlooks the water from the bridge. How do you, at this point, how do you stop and help this man? Like, how do you stop him from what he's going to do? What is the strategy here? And it's at an hour, 40 minutes into this movie, with only 30 minutes left, that Clarence shows up, and you get the part, Michael, that you must constantly see parodied everywhere. Were you surprised at how late into the narrative that this
Absolutely.
occurred? Yeah.
I thought at the latest it'd be like halfway through.
Nope.
But yeah, like the fact that there was a full movie before the segment, I was like, what? This is what? This is not what I heard about. This is not what Timmy Turner went through his nightmare for.
Gee. I guess, yeah, in a feature film, like, I guess we'll talk more about the specifics of what happens, but, like, you get the idea pretty quickly. So there's only so much you could do in this twisted reality. So I can't think of ways to have made that section longer without it becoming, like, a little unnecessary.
Oh, but people constantly do, even though they're satirizing it. There are whole movies that are made out of a sequence like that. So
I do want to mention really quickly another favorite little thing about the movie.
Please.
Right, it's Clarence's first shot in the movie. Do we like that shot?
Well, I mean, it's just he's very casually there, right?
It's so off-putting because the movie, as a normal film does, is typically very good about visualizing and at the setup for each scene at the very top, giving you a sense of who is there, and then you have, for the first time utilized in this movie, first and only time utilized in this movie, you know, George is like overlooking the bridge, and then all of a sudden, not even in a wide where you could like establish where he is in the area, you just suddenly get like a medium close of Clarence, just his face, and you don't know who he is yet. It's just you suddenly cut to this person, and you cut back to George.
Right,
like,
because we haven't seen him yet. Yeah.
Excuse me. And if you're thinking about it, you could mayhaps guess that it was the person that has been watching George's life, and now that's the first time you're seeing him. But it's not like the movie pauses to say who it is. It cuts to him, and then it cuts back to George, and that's it. It is bizarre, and I love it.
You know what that says to me? And because I've always liked that. And like without necessarily like really being drawn to it happens, and I subconsciously like it. I think what it is just that you're saying like, oh, the movie usually shows like sort of like who's there and who's seeing. Clarence has been there the whole time, and that's what that illustrates. Like not literally there, but he's been through his life. So yeah, he's just casually there. It's not a big magical arrival of an insertion of like, then now I am on this plane of reality. No, he's there.
I'd love to make some like parody videos where we're just watching some other scene of something else, and then you cut to that shot of Clarence and then come back.
Make it a meme, everybody.
Let's make it a meme, please. Yeah. If It Was a Wonderful Life was just a little more relevant in our like online spheres,
right?
I think it would be a big hit. The movie might be a little bit older at this point. I don't know how many of the younger folk know it. If Michael's any indication, I mean.
Absolutely. I mean, Clarence, his strategy to help George in this point, it's simple. Because even in George's lowest of lows, after watching the highlight reel of George's whole life, Clarence, even Angel's second-class Clarence, knows this much about George. If Clarence jumps in the water and screams help, then that will take precedence over anything George is going through. Of course, George will help him. And yeah, it's so interesting tonally that this it truly feels like something magical has arrived in an almost entirely grounded film. And it's like an out-of-body experience. Even now when I watch it, I know this movie like the back of my hand, but I see this and I'm just like, we've been transported. Like, this is just a totally different perspective. Like, it's like we are jumping inside a movie that was a fixed object, and we're changing it alongside Clarence. We are Clarence. We've watched George grow up since he was a little boy. We're George's guardian angel. We know everything about him and everything there is to know, really. So, yeah, I mean, that just really strikes me. So
it's weird when the audience surrogate character magically becomes a character pretty late into the film, but I mean, it works. It completely works. It's just it's not something you see often.
Yeah.
And I get that this is probably like baby's first It's a Wonderful Life
Sure.
viewing.
No, I would like to hear the baby.
Note that I assume is like very well you're supposed to get it the first time, but either way, it still made me feel, as the kids say. It parallels like the first scene of the movie where he lost like the hearing in his ear, saving his brother in the water. He's like, I'll do that again, even though I'm gonna kill myself.
And the great irony of that is he's just about to get that hearing in his ear back because George is saying, like, Clarence is trying to talk him off the ledge, basically. Well, I mean, they're not on the ledge anymore, but the metaphorical ledge. And George concedes, like, yeah, no, I mean, it probably, like, people wouldn't be happier if I killed myself. And now I suppose it would be better if I had never been born. And Clarence is like, all right. So then that's what it'll have been. You've never been born, and the wind howls outside, the heavens above. Don't have to make that big of a fuss out of it. But yeah, now George, he has, like, the hearing in his ear is back. It's as if he's never lived. Like, his bleeding mouth is no longer bleeding. He has no obligations suddenly. That tragic, like, climax of the story, what's really supplying that tension, the tension in this, like, grounded film is evaporated. It's gone. Potter isn't after him anymore. But this is all much worse because now we're living in Pottersville. And, yeah, like, he walks through it. It's a scary sight. That tree is fine, at least. But, yeah, I mean, that's the
only thing that's fine.
But in this timeline, it was someone else that planted it, so it doesn't even matter.
Oh,
right.
Dang.
No positive side, no bright side.
George and Clarence are a great pair together.
Yes.
And, it's another example of really important character who isn't in a ton of the movie, but is incredibly memorable. Obviously, with how much time he spends in the last half hour of the movie, he's in it more so than most characters. But I mean, like, it's a never-ending adventure of George and the bands of misfits that are Bedford Falls and the heavens. The two equal forces. I would have even been happy to see George and Clarence. There's no fit for that in the movie, but like George and Clarence hanging out with George in like more of like a soberer kind of state. Like,
because George seems
so much of their interaction is like George like, well, what's going? I'm not really getting, like, he's pretty out of it. Like, between him being a little drunk and him like not like being able to like fully comprehend the fact that like the things he is experiencing are real.
Yeah, that's the right way to play it. There's not a lot of time
for them to just kind of bond like normal people, like George bonds with people normally throughout the film.
I mean,
but it's still a lot of fun.
If we're going to the Christmas Carol comparison, then obviously he's really queued up for it, Scrooge in Christmas Carol, of you're going to be visited by these spirits. And he knows what's coming. There's no, like, he tries to deny at first, Scrooge, but he can't, and it's just, he's very taken away by it. And he'll get transported to these periods where he can view everything, but he can't interact. And it is absolutely periods of time in which he did live. It's just he is distanced from it and not able to have any of that interaction. But it is completely the inverse here of, no, this is an alternate world in which you don't exist, but you can interact. I never really I thought about how, like, this is like Christmas Carol, because I was kind of thinking all, like, cheekily when doing Checking It Twice, like, oh, okay, well, we'll do a Christmas Carol episode. We'll do 3 Christmas Carols, so to speak, because we got My Little Pony, which laid down the groundwork, then we got Muppet Christmas Carol, and then we'll do It's a Wonderful Life. But I didn't really think about how it is so much then that inverse of just, you are then forced to interact with these people, and the memory of what is real lives only in you. Like, that's the only place that it still exists. Like, it just, I mean, do we have any thoughts on Christmas Carol, It's a Wonderful Life intertwining thematically?
Like, feel, Michael.
Yeah. When we were watching this, I definitely like was kind of startled when he was like interacting with people and they were interacting back, because I was like, oh, I thought it was just gonna be like a viewing thing,
Right.
like a pretty much any rule like this would be. Yeah, I'm just gonna show you this alternate reality, just kind of like in my little bowl of magic.
Crystal ball, kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
crystal ball. Just look at it.
Right.
Because that's pretty much how like every single parody is. So that's just what I assumed this would be too. And
Sure,
then
you're
he was
right.
talking to people, and then they would respond to him, and I would like, oh, okay, different rules
It's
than I
harder to
thought.
live in denial like this.
It is. He goes to Martini's to order drinks, but it's not Martini's, it's Nick's. It's which is strange, Clarence. You'll see a lot of strange things from now on, which, yeah, very haunting. You got that cash register bell going off. That's when we first hear. And I mean, it's crazy because this is, again, kind of what you were saying about setting up, like, Martini's just only very shortly before. The line of, oh, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. You get it here, and then it really closes out the movie, but it feels totally satisfying. It doesn't feel like this is
It
calling
feels like
back to a line.
It's so integral. Speaking of Martini's bar in a general sense,
Yes.
I feel like the first few times I saw it, granted I was a lot younger, but like I didn't quite get the confusion because I don't think it really clicked with me that Martini owned a bar called Martini's, and that's not like I kind of knew who Martini was by his face, but you don't see him at the bar until towards the end, and he's not such a big character that you're really making the connection between him and the person that you were seeing earlier in the movie. I think it was as I got a little older that it was actually clicking with me. Oh, this is a weird thing, and also because in both scenarios Nick is bartending, but
right.
To me, it took a while for me to quite gather that, oh, this is weird because usually Martini owns this place.
Yes, it's more of a subtle difference than what we'll come to see.
Which, I mean, I would say is one of the few weaknesses for the movie in that, like, I have to, like, it took me, again, maybe it just came with age, but it did take multiple viewings to, like, that for that information to sink in, just because it's one of the few places we very specifically go to during this journey of how the world has changed, and it's the first main stop is one of the lesser established places. Granted, after that there's they do a good job of escalating. You never go to a place and feel like it's a step down in importance, which I guess Martini/Nick's bar would have been if they did it at any point other than the beginning.
It's a good point.
But also, like, you don't have a great sense of Nick as a character,
right?
Like, obviously, like, you would imagine that he's not a jerk like he is in Pottersville reality. But you don't. I don't think you know him so well enough. I mean, maybe I'll take that back because I mean, I gave the whole spiel about him, him and Martini picking George back up off the ground and caring so much about him.
Right, but we just saw that. So,
but we don't know how he is just with normal strangers.
Absolutely, because now he's really coming off like a jerk. Just even hearing anyone like just say something. Like, Clarence is just saying stuff that sounds kind of silly, but he is not standing for any of it. He only just makes one joke of, like, like, after they're already been thrown out, get me, I'm giving out wings, because he keeps hitting the cash register. Yeah.
And everyone's laughing as though they heard the whole thing.
Right.
My family likes to make fun of that part right there because it's like the whole
that's
joint
true.
is listening into that, like, really quiet conversation.
Gosh, I never even thought about that. Yeah, and everyone laughs. Like, he just sounds like a crazy person.
But I still really
they're laughing at him, not with him. Didn't you know?
Oh, okay. I guess so.
Bringing back to the start of this little podcast, that's where we get the line. And we don't need any characters to give the joint catmosphere.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like catmosphere, which is a point that Justin really wanted to
listen
make.
to that? Because
no, I'm going off your word.
You're taking my word for it. Because, so maybe we'll both sound crazy when we watch it again.
Yeah. Well, just as crazy as Mr. Gower, who's now a drunken bum, the laughingstock, who
That's
previously
so
spent
sad.
20 years in jail for poisoning a kid because George wasn't there. And George, he finally is kind of putting it together. Clarence really does have the power to show him some strange things, and you get this exchange of, if I wasn't born, who am I? You're nobody. You have no identity. None of your documents are on your person. Even Zuzu's petals that he had in his pockets are missing. Gone.
That line, just mentioning Zuzu's petals, that hits hard. And again, we had one amazing scene with her at this point, and that's it. She wasn't even in the majority of the stuff back at the house with the family. It's just that one scene when he's in the room with her. But before we leave Martinis, I do want to throw out there that we're making jokes about the name Mary, but even more on the nose. I love that they maybe named a character Martini just so they could have this joke about Nick saying after George is like, "Oh, where's Martini?" and Nick going, "You want a martini?"
Oh, they really good one.
I'm like, did they name a character Martini just for that one joke?
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. So, the Bailey Building and Loan, it's gone out of business years ago, turned into a dance club. George jumps into Ernie's cab to drive me home, but the home hasn't been lived in 20 years. His own mother doesn't recognize him. Everything's fallen apart. As Clarence says, each man's life touches so many other lives. And when he's gone, it leaves an awful hole. Bailey Park's not there, it's a cemetery, and you get that scene of the Harry's tombstone, and every man on that transport that from the war died, because Harry wasn't there to save them, because you weren't there to save Harry, which is one of my favorite quotes. Just so blunt, to the point, really, like, even as a kid, you feel the gravity of that. And then, of course, you see George, you really had a wonderful life. Don't you see what a mistake it would be to throw it away? Oh, of all the, like, I mean, it's not the direct title drop, but, like, gosh, it feels so, like, seamlessly, not just seamlessly integrated, very just, that is why, like, why this movie is called this.
I would imagine that they wrote that line before naming the movie.
Right, but, like, it just so feels that, you hear that out of context, you're just like, oh, It's a Wonderful Life. What a fun, upbeat movie. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's a darker movie than you would expect. But no, the meaning of It's a Wonderful Life is, George, you have one. Like, you don't think that you do, but you do. Like, please understand. And, like, and any of you watching, you have a wonderful life. It is, like, life is wonderful. It's a wonderful life, you know?
Even if
like,
you don't live your big dreams, you still got your peoples.
Right. Clarence is not supposed to tell George where Mary is, because he's an old maid just about to close up the library. It's okay. So, like, I mean, she's doing well. She's at the library. She doesn't want to get married.
On that a lot.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I mean, Mary has that whole point earlier about, like, I just married you so I wouldn't have to be an old maid. I don't think she's the type that would necessarily have wanted to get married out of obligation if she didn't really find love. Right. Aside from that, so maybe it's just,
clearly without George there, she still didn't end up with Sam.
Right, exactly. So she could have if she wanted to. So, to me, it just seems like an intentional choice. So she's just doing her thing. She's just upset because this strange man is going up to her that she doesn't know. So, I mean, wouldn't you be too? Wouldn't you be a little bit freaked out?
Right, and I think a lot of people seem to rag on that moment as though the movie is trying to say, how awful is it that without George, she ended up being a librarian? But I mean, I don't think that's what they're trying to do. Maybe society had different values back then that wanted to, like, make it clear that, like, a woman probably should get married. See? And can you believe that this happened to her? But, like, it comes across to me more like the point is that George is so upset that the person with all the answers, as we were talking about earlier, doesn't remember him, and that's more heartbreaking than anyone else. And he's just so desperate to be back with the person that he loves more than anything in the world.
Right. That's my read on it as well, because I would prefer to read it that way, obviously, instead of just, it's sexist. So I wouldn't want to, but I do think that is a valid interpretation of the event. That it's a tragedy because his mother doesn't remember him, his wife doesn't remember him, that his kids don't exist. That's upsetting. Yeah, like, that's what's tragic. I don't think they really. I think the way people talk about this, it makes it sound like the movie vilifies her way more. Of just like, oh yeah, she's like homeless, living on the streets. Like, no, she's at a library. She's at a library doing her thing. I'd love to work at a library. Mary's killing it. Alt universe.
We'll
Mary.
put it to a vote for Michael, right?
Yeah, please.
Michael, It's a Wonderful Life. Very sexist or a little sexist?
Yes, please, white man. Can you answer? The white men are asking.
Probably in the middle. I'm not. I know that's like the cheapo answer, but a little bit.
A little bit. Okay. Do you think it's movie's fault? Do you think it's the 40s' fault? Do you think people are inherently
You're saying that as if
evil?
those are two separate answers.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like, maybe if we had better, like, cultural understanding of the 40s, we could better, like, interrogate whether or not, like, how standardized it would be at the time. So, I mean, I guess the question would be, like, how much is it just expected at the time so that the movie making that decision just felt like a normal thing. It's like, well, of course it's bad that she's a librarian. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
We're in the 40s. We all know this.
Right. No, it's worth addressing no matter what. So I'm glad that it was like we are talking about it in that respect. So yeah. So basically, look, I think I give her credit for her alternate universe accomplishments, but George is just so he's still in a manic daze. Punches Bert the cop, nearly gets shot. Clarence, I don't care what happens to me. Get me back to my wife and kids. I want to live again. And the way I mean, Clarence, he's not even actually at his side at this point. Like, we don't even get, like, a real clear, like, you don't see a last shot of Clarence that you realize is going to be the last shot of Clarence. Because you're just so with George in this moment. And, yeah, I mean, it really is then just you zoom in on that amazing performance from Jimmy Stewart, and there's a reason why that shot is grainier, because it wasn't an actual organic zoom in. It was put in by Frank Capra because he was so drawn to that. Because it wasn't written in like you're gonna break down and cry as you say this, but that's what happened because it rang so true, the material, and so they wanted to go closer. And of course, it's iconic what happens next. The snow begins to fall, and what a choice to have the snow falling be what brings us back into this reality, this beautiful Christmas reality.
I used to be really confused when I was younger. I was like, so like George wasn't born, and because of that, it didn't snow that day. But like it really, I think it rings true more to what we're talking about for like the very beginning of the movie, how the heavens and the cosmos are kind of intertwined, and it just feels it's just that magical presence of we're stopping the weather because something is off, and everything feels off as a result, comparatively. It feels very fit with the world that they set up for how the heavens work in this movie.
Well, Clarence was a movie novice before, but now he understands the language of cinema, and he's gonna use it. He's gonna do that visual storytelling with the snow. Good for him. He went to film school. He did it. So yeah, I mean, yeah. Again, the sheer joy of this. Bert coming up. Bert, you know me? My mouth's bleeding. Bert. Zuzu's pedals. The car, like, it sees the car. Michael, I mean, we were all laughing at this. Like, I laugh every time. It's just so relieving and so funny. Cheering. Yay! Bedford Falls!
No, yeah, just like every time he sees anything, he has like the same exact cheer. Where if this is like an animated thing, I'd be like, oh yeah, they just use the same like audio. But like, I don't know. It's just fun seeing him like run by the sign, be like, yeah! And like run over and be like, yeah,
right. Absolutely.
He even cheers at Potter. Like
he wishes Merry Christmas. Yes,
he could deal with Potter. He has a good life, as it turns out.
Merry Christmas to every person he sees, every building, and even Mr. Potter, who he was so deathly afraid of just before. And Mr. Potter goes, "Happy New Year to you in jail." which is amazing. And we don't get, like, we're not worried about it anymore. He's not worried about it. Oh, warrant for my arrest. Isn't it wonderful? I'm going to jail. Merry Christmas. He kisses that peach that always breaks off on the stairs.
The reporter, the DA, everyone there, like, watching, like, go up the stairs. And I'm sure at that time they're thinking to themselves, like, are we gonna, like, do we put a stop to this at some point?
Yeah,
they
like,
can't just let the show go on for a while. Him hanging out with his kids and kissing his wife a lot.
It's upsetting, but yeah.
But then the miracle.
Because Mary,
34th
look,
Street happens.
Exactly. Because if George had just let all of this pass, he had people that were going to help him, and Mary orchestrated it of course, because Mary's great. We all need a Mary in our lives. So he worked to resolve this. They're on their way. We stand Mary. They're on their way. Stand right over here by the tree. So he clears off the table. George, is a miracle. What's going to happen? Everyone comes in, and everyone's giving money. Mary,
money?
Yeah. But we really like money right now. Because she told people that George was in trouble. They didn't ask any questions. They just came. And everyone's back. Everyone's here. Mr. Martini, Mr. Dower, Violet, who we had. There was an interesting little arc here that had happened as well that I wanted to briefly address. Of how she was like looking to get a loan from him, and she kind of has like the mini arc of having wanted to leave Bedford Falls, and George was going to encourage that, as he does for everyone other than himself. But Violet, and it seems like we don't really see this play out on screen, but the way I always kind of take it is that Violet has been inspired by George and just decides to stay and really sees the value in this community after like being all for like the glitz and glamour previously. It's just like, no, I'm staying. And it makes the world feel so big and like the characters so rich that it's just something that she kind of came to as an independent conclusion. I feel like, I mean, I don't need any continuation to this movie, but I could see a Violet story of like sort of what she went through.
Excellent adventure.
Yes, exactly. But everyone comes. That people, they come in. I wouldn't have a roof over my head if it wasn't for you, George. And then Sam gives $25,000. And it's like, it goes back to the pool. Everyone jumps in. Hark the Herald Angels Sing comes on. You like that? I thought that this time.
I love that.
Hark the Herald Angels Sing comes on. This was before it ended to Charlie Brown Christmas as well.
Even the guy with that took $242 from the bank returns his money.
Yeah! Which, look at that growth. I want to see his arc. But yeah, best of all, Harry comes alive and well and celebrate. And you really feel that the way Harry, like, he toasts his big brother, the richest man in town. If you're not crying by now, I don't know who you are.
And he gets about how he was always the richest man in town. He has everyone. He has friends.
He does. Mr. Potter doesn't get his comeuppance. If you want to see the great SNL skit about it, then I recommend it. If you want to see him get...
I was thinking about that during this watch. So yeah, that does.
Oh, I'll send it to you. Yeah. You'll get a kick out of it. But emphasis on kick. And but it truly doesn't matter, and it speaks to the core of the film. Like, I mean, there's evil out there, but you just have to. It's as George said to them when the Depression hit, like, we can get through this together, and that's what they do in the face of great evil. And there's that last note from Clarence: "Dear George, remember, no man is a failure who has friends. Thanks for the wings." And yeah, it's like Mary's like, who's that? It's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of his. Aww. And you get that last line from Zuzu. Teacher says, every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. That's right. Attaboy, Clarence.
I could have done with one more apology to that teacher.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that should have been the whole last scene.
Yeah, that's for the sequel.
Yeah. The unfinished business. Yeah. But
it's such a sweet moment, and Clarence really deserves it.
We end on that big bell.
He made cinema history. I don't think he even understands.
You're right. It's really directed by Clarence, ultimately.
Whoa.
It's just Frank Capra is just a pseudonym. If you rearrange the Clarence in Clarence, you get Capra. So,
yeah. With an embarrassing leftover Y.
Thank you, Michael. I love that. So yeah, we end on that big bell that opened the film, but now we understand it's the bell ringing because the wings have been achieved. And look, I mean, just to close out, like, this year, this year, much like George Bailey, haven't we all felt like we're failures trapped in our homes, unable to leave, unable to escape, seemingly accomplish much of anything? The world's against us, but we've learned to modify our expectations and what it is to have achieved something, because through it all we hope that we're loved, and I think that we are, and I think this movie assures us of that. So it hits different in 2020.
Well, Brian, I want to throw out there that
Please.
although I could relate to the majority of what you said, the guy behind a whole lot of awesome Following with Style 1995 / Brian Koch content throughout 2020, the creator of Checking It Twice, and so much on Animation Epic, not limited to Inanimate Answers, ain't no failure in my book.
Oh.
And unlike Potter, we are talking about my book.
Wow. I feel like the end of the movie.
I think I speak for all of us that have been listening through Checking It Twice when we say we are thankful for you, we are thankful for Michael, and we are thankful for the little holiday cheer you have both been able to bring to all of us.
Thank you. Michael, is there anything? I don't think there's anything else under the tree, but is there anything that you want to say?
I want to say thanks for listening in on our little Christmas shenanigans that we've had throughout the month. It's been a fun time, and I've watched a lot of Christmas stuff I've never seen before. Some that I enjoyed and one that I didn't. It was very fun.
Well, Prep and
to
Land.
watch.
That's fine. That's fine if you didn't like that one. Close out on the quote from
It's a Wonderful Life Day. We had to... How many have we mentioned throughout the podcast? Like all of them at this point. Okay, continue.
That last quote on the memorial of George's father. All you can take with you is that which you've given away. And we've given away so much of our time, and you've given away so much of your time listening to us, assuming that you are. So all I can hope is that what you take with you, you give it back. It's a wonderful life, and it's been a wonderful time with all of you. Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas.
Help you down!
Help you down! And stop.
Oh, I found a present behind the tree. It says Nutcracker in the Four Realms. Must have fallen out of the fireplace. I'll put it back in there.